Hello everyone, and thank you once again for joining me. In this particular video, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of program or project control, and we're going to go through these real fast and get to our program control file up here, up above, in our ribbon up above here. So anyway, we're going to continue on from where we were before, and we're going to kind of go over we're going to talk more about, there is like a what's known as like a jump, a label, and then some other stuff. But for this particular video, I want to focus more on just a particular like JSR and an RET or a return. So JSR, what that does is it gives us the ability to jump to another subroutine. And a lot of times we see this in programming. Most of the time, like in Studio 5000, we kind of think a little bit more in like the jump label and then some of the other features that JSRs can kind of have in a sense, because we have the ability to store stuff in local tags and we want to transfer that information into another thing, so we have to use those features in order to transfer some of that information. In the case where you get like some programmers, they don't want to do that, so they'll write everything in a scope tag so it's all saved throughout the project itself, which is a lot more beneficial. That's the way HMIs talk to us, is generally through the scope tags or controller scope tags. Now that's in 5000. So in this particular set here, again, most of the stuff is stored in a project, so the whole project can see it as a whole. It isn't just stored in one routine. So what we would do a lot of times is that we might have multiple ladders or routines, if you will, in different for different reasons. So you might create like ladder 6 here. It might be like a fault routine, or like a um, let's see here, like maybe like a fault handler. And when I say that, I don't want like a major programmer to be like, well, we're not talking about like a fault handler. No, I understand what we're talking about there. And we're not talking about a fault handler. This would be like more of how maybe our particular piece of equipment handles like a door not closed kind of fault or something along those lines. So you might change the name on this. And so in order to do that for real fast, is we're going to go right click on it and we're going to click rename, and then it's going to erase that, and we might call it like we'll just call it like M faults, so that we can talk about like machine faults. And it's going to keep the ladder 6, and then we know now it's machine faults. We might say we want to change ladder 7 to be we'll call it like safety inputs, so that not because we're using safety in this particular controller to be like a like a safety controller, but rather this is our inputs telling us when our safety controller is happy or when it's not happy about whatever's going on. So an e-stop's been pressed is handled out of the safety controller, but we're getting an input into our controller so that we can see it on the HMI as a display that safety has been triggered somehow. Now, we create these routines or ladders, but we have no real way for the program to know that it needs to access them. The only way we can allow the program to say run these routines in your scan is by giving it a jump to subroutine command. So in order to do that, we would go back to our user here and we would create a couple more a couple more rungs, and then we're going to obviously go back to our program control and we would add 2 jump to subroutine commands. And these commands are going to actually be, they're kind of programmed a little funky here. You actually have to call them U colon and then the ladder number. So in this case, we want this jump to subroutine to go directly to 6. And then I'm just going to leave no description on that. And then the next one's going to be to U7. And again, I'm not going to put any description on it. And then we're going to verify our project, and it's going to say, okay, yay, verily, we're happy with everything you did there. So what this does is that this particular rung 2, is your main program or main project or your main routine. And it's always going to scan this routine in order from top to bottom. It will not scan any of these other routines unless you give it a jump to subroutine and tell it to go to those routines. So, for instance, our user fault, our HSC input, and our STI input or file, none of those are used because we have not given them a jump to subroutine to tell it to go to them. We've only given it a jump to subroutine to go to M faults and safety inputs. Now, we also have the authority as the programmer to say maybe we don't want it to go to machine faults first or safety inputs. We want it to go vice versa. So we want ladder 7 to be scanned before ladder 6 is scanned. You kind of have to determine in your own programming need why you would go whichever. If it doesn't matter to you and you just need to go, there's a lot of times you just need to scan those. There's a lot of times you'll see them all written in order. So you'll start at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all the way to 15 or whatever it might be. Just kind of depends on your own personal preference or the need for how your program or project is needing to be scanned in what order. Let's scan. I'll go ahead and do that. Now, in some instances, you might have a whole bunch of code in here, a whole bunch of logic within this thing that you might want it to return back to scanning, let's say these two counters, and then go back and finish it up. In those cases, you might jump to the subroutine for a different reason, or you might return sooner, or some of those other reasons. In our particular case, a lot of times we just leave it as a JSR, and then it returns knowing that it's scanned the routine, and then it goes back to what's the next step on this particular rung, and then it goes and scans those routines. And it'll scan it in order. So once this is scanned, then it'll automatically return back, go to 11, and then say, oh, okay, I need to go scan that routine, and then it'll scan that routine. If you want to do it as the correct way of programming, you can put a return. And all that does is allow it to return back to the main subroutine or the main routine that it came from. You could also do something like you could nest it in a sense. So I could go into, let's say, 7, and I could put a JSR in here to jump to, and I'm going to go ahead and put, so I could put a jump to subroutine, and I could put it in as once you get done scanning X reasons, whatever, I can put it in as scan number 8. And then from there, when I get to number 8, then I can do a return. So return to the routine. And basically I've nested a whole bunch of stuff within the program. So kind of depends on how you need to scan it and what your scan times are and what your purposing is. But you can do some crazy things with the jump to subroutines, but I caution you on doing that as what is your real need for it. Traditionally and generally speaking, everything comes out of your main program. However, in very, very advanced programming, we do see the need for going farther into jumping to different routines within routines, nesting it for some reason and in different ways and features. Again, like I've said several times throughout the series and even in this own video, is what is your need and why are you doing it? And those are the questions you have to ask yourself and you have to answer yourself. So that concludes everything that we're going to talk about on jump to subroutines as well as returning from those subroutines. So thank you all for watching and stay tuned for our next video.